Okay, so as promised, here we are. We're going to now create the entity framework classes based on the database that we created in the last video. So I'm going to share my screen. And as you see here, here's the database. Now we're going to open up Visual Studio and we're going to create a new project. So we're going to say right click, add new project. We're going to create this in a separate project. Now you don't have to create this in a separate project, but it's better that you do for portability reasons. So we're going to be creating it in a separate library, and we're imagining a thing, kind of a situation where we're going to be creating a class library that's going to be useful down the line that we can use in other projects. So it's always better to create classes in a library separately. So we're going to create a .NET Framework class library, and you can scroll down here on the right and find that. Make sure that it is .NET Framework and not .NET Core. You can search for it. You can put in .NET Framework, stuff like that. So anyway, since I do it so often, it's on the left side. So say next. I'm going to call this just Green Pages MVC. Library. So I'm going to create. And so as you see, it automatically creates a class. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. So I mentioned it before that, or maybe I didn't mention it before, I don't remember exactly, but you can use this Object Explorer inside of SQL Server Management Studio to scroll through your database. This is really the best way to manage a database, but Visual Studio does have one built in as well. So if you go to View SQL Server Object Explorer, it'll put this, basically the same thing on the left side here. So you got to connect to the SQL Server, so add SQL Server. And here, my server is just my local host. So you can, if you want to just connect to localhost, you can put a dot here. And then you can select the database you want to view. It's pretty much that simple. But you can put in your entire computer name instead. That's the exact same thing. So we can say connect. So as you see here, databases, green pages, and then it's got the list of tables. And as you see here is persons, emails, addresses, and phone numbers. So, and you can even, you can look at the columns, you can see the keys, it's pretty decent as far as a object browser goes for SQL Server. But personally, if you're gonna be doing a lot of SQL stuff, I recommend that you do it from SQL Server. But for this simple demonstration, we can use this as well. So what we're going to do now that we're looking at the tables and we're going to create the entity-based classes. Well, how are we going to do that? First thing we're going to need to do is include a entity framework library from NuGet. Remember, NuGet is our package manager. So we're going to get, we're going to say browse, and we're going to say entity. That should be enough. And there it is, entity framework. Notice there's entity framework core. That's if you're doing core projects. And instead of .NET framework, you're doing .NET core projects. Make sure you select the correct one for whatever you're doing. You can even see over here on the left, dependencies is .NET framework version 4 or 5. So here I'm going to say install 4 or 4.5. And then actually, I'm going to do it from, so not to change anything, but I'm actually do it from up top, and you'll see that I can apply it to both projects at once. So if you do manage NuGet packages from up there, you can actually install on both of them at the same time, because I would have to do that for both. And you got to go to browse, sorry, entity framework. So I can apply it to both projects and install it both at once. So, okay, accept. So now I've got references to entity framework stuff in both projects instead of just the one. Okay, so now that I've added the entity framework capability to it, I can now right click and say add. Now I'm just going to say new item. What I'm trying to add is the database objects as classes. So here you're just going to click on ADO.NET data model, entity data model. You're going to say add, and you get a menu here. You can say designer from database. You can go from EF designer from database. That's what I'm doing. So you can actually go the other direction. You can go from classes into the databases, or you can go from the databases into the classes. You're going to probably, I've done this a few times, so I actually have a database connection object here, but you can say new connection, and then it asks you for the database server, put in your dot or your computer name, or if you have a different SQL server, you can connect to that, whatever you want. But I already have one, so I'm gonna say, yeah, there you go. Next, and tables. So if we had views or stored procedures, we could make those into objects as well. I just want the tables. So a couple of choices here: pluralize or singularize generated object names and include foreign key columns in the model. Those two I want, because I want the model to be the same as the classes. But the singularize and pluralize thing is great because it's going to actually singularize and call the object address, email, person, phone number. And it's great actually the opposite way. When you're creating it from the classes into the database, it'll pluralize the table names for you. And one that I would point out is it is smart enough to know that the plural of person is people. So you have to say, well, now use persons instead. But anyway, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to say finish. And then that is going to create the classes over on the right that match up with the tables. Give that a minute to run. And as you see, it does a nice job of connecting up the foreign key objects. So saying that a address is related to a person, a phone number is related to a person, email is related to a person. So it'll do this nice class diagram for you. Another thing that I could show you here is that the classes themselves have parent objects. So it has a person object, and the person object has child objects of lists of addresses, lists of emails, lists of phone numbers. So it does all of this for you, and this is all compartmentalized. All the connections are taken care of, things like that. So we'll get into a little bit more, how to use this in the next video, how to really use it in code. But this is how you create the classes. It's really that simple. So that's it for this video. The next one, we'll actually use these classes and start creating our application.